to open it up. Great. Okay. So just to open it up with, I guess, a quick question, or before I get into the question. So what I'm going to do today is walk through Drift Email. Drift Email is a tool that I've recently implemented, like within the last 2 months or so, to manage email replies. And they've got a lot of cool and nifty features that help out with that. So quick question for everybody. Feel free to chime in, but how are you guys handling email replies today? I'm genuinely curious, like what strategies people take, if there's, like a shared mailbox that people monitor, who's responsible for that. If there's a no reply that they're using.
Marketing messages?
Yeah, like any type of marketing communications that you're sending.
Apparently we have a mailbox. I have successfully avoided getting access to it. I keep finding a reason not to, because I don't want to deal with it. But yes, we have a group mailbox that some people have access to and check occasionally.
Yeah. Is that pretty common for everybody? Is anybody sending emails directly from like lead owners and having replies go to their mailboxes and they manage them themselves?
Yep.
That was a case-by-case basis. We would do that.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
Try to avoid
What was that, Tara?
I said I try to avoid that.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, cool. Well, Drift is a tool that can potentially, or not potentially, can absolutely help with that. So let me actually share my full desktop. Hang on. Okay. Cool. So like I mentioned, Drift handles email reply management. So what it does is they've got some natural language processing as part of their product that categorizes replies into certain buckets. So those buckets, some of these are listed here. So like obviously bounces, but also things like when people leave the company. So an autoresponder that says, hey, this person no longer works here, contact such and such person, instead. That would be like the left company reply type. Also human replies, vacation out of office, things like that. So it basically categorizes replies into these different buckets. And then you can trigger workflows, update data, route leads to specific people based off of those reply categories, as well as a few other things that we'll get into. But that's like one of the kind of primary main use cases. And then obviously part of that is keeping up with database health and hygiene. So like when people leave their position, you can invalidate their email address. You can also enrich existing contacts with phone numbers and titles that Drift is able to parse from email signatures. And then you can also create new leads for like that example I was just talking about. Somebody leaves the company and then within the body of the email, they list a new person and a new email address for like their replacement. You can create a new lead in that situation. So how does it work? So Drift Email has an SMTP server and it handles email responses. So what you do from Marketo is you create a subdomain and then you use that subdomain in the from and reply to fields, and replies to that subdomain are pointed to the Drift server. And then within the Drift tool itself is where you set up the rules for how those replies should be processed. So as far as implementation steps, first thing, create an API user and a launch point connection, right? Similar with every other tool. And then you add an email subdomain to Marketo. So that's in the admin section, which I'm sure most of you guys are probably familiar with, but within the email section, SFTP and DKIM, you'll add a new domain. So this is where you'll add your subdomain. You will get the information for the DKIM record, which most likely you'd share with your IT team. Once you have that, hand it off to the IT team, and they will set up the DKIM record as well as the SPF record and the MX record. The MX record is the one that points the replies towards the drift servers. But all that will be set up in the DNS. And then you can come back into Marketo and you can verify that the DNS is all the records are set up the right way. So once you do that, you can connect the subdomain to Drift email. So that happens here in Drift. So this is the Drift email product, which I'll walk through in a little bit more detail. But from the integration standpoint, you would jump into settings, click on integrations, connect to Marketo. But then, yeah, more importantly, so the reply domain section, this is where you'll add your subdomain, validate it, and then you're good to go. So once you've done those steps, you can create some custom fields in Marketo. So Drift has fields that capture reply text, the sender, lots of different things. So I think I've actually got, and I've got a link to this in the deck too, that I'm sure we'll share after the call, but these are a list of all of the different fields that Drift offers. So you can create these as custom fields in Marketo and then map them together. And then, obviously use those in your campaigns in Marketo to, determine, what you're doing with your data. But lots of great fields here. So once you get whatever you want created in Marketo, you can set up the skills within Drift. So the specific skills are what determines what happens to a reply. So they've got a route and track skill, which we can walk through, skills to update contacts, enrich contacts, and then also create new contacts. And then another aspect of that too is adding people to lists in Marketo, which is today how I'm triggering a lot of my campaigns to run. So I'll stop there. Does anybody have questions about just those implementation steps or like how Drift works, high level?
How do they bill you? Is it per person, per item that runs through? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's the total monthly replies that Drift processes. So our contract is $4,200 a year, and that's with a 2,000 monthly reply volume. So they say to budget for about 2 to 3% of your total send volume is about how many monthly replies that you'll get.
I think, I don't know if it's still like this, but you have to make sure that the from email address and the reply to are the same and that they have your subdomain in there, right?
Exactly, yeah. And I think the reason why is because when somebody, like an autoresponder, I think goes to the from email more often than not, whereas a direct reply will go to the reply to address. And if you don't use your subdomain in both of those, you're not going to get every reply processed by Drift servers. It might be some and not others in that case.
And I think one other thing we learned when I used this, my last company, which I love Drift email, like we had like a marketing at reply dot whatever, and you could also put the person's name at reply dot whatever your domain is, and it would still come back into your main, it would still go back into Drift email, even though it had the person's name on there. So it's a little bit more personalized, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the cool things, and we're actually not using their dynamic route feature, but basically if you do send emails from reps or even from your CSM team directly, and let's say john.charlesworth@reply.narvar.com, your routing skill can take into account a dynamic alias where essentially what this is doing is it's going to remove that subdomain and it's going to send the reply dynamically to john.charlesworth@narvar.com. And yeah, I've got something that I'll show in Marketo maybe towards the end of the presentation that can help automate like that like automate a salesperson's email with the subdomain using a token, using an email script token, so velocity script. I'm not doing that today. I've tested it and it works, but I think it would be a good solution if that was like a common use case for your business. So I'll cover that at the end. But yeah, that's the dynamic routing is definitely cool.
Hey, John, quick question. This is Sibs. I just want to make sure I was understanding how Drift email works. I'm guessing it's independent of Drift chat, right?
It is completely independent. Yeah. So we actually don't use Drift chat. We only purchase the email product.
Got it. So then just from, 30,000 feet, like a use case, right? You send out an email, the recipient basically replies, right? Says, hey, I really like your product. Who do I talk to, right? Is in that scenario, is that, and then obviously the reply to would meet the criteria that you set, right? In terms of the subdomain and such that you'd set up. And then when they hit reply and it hits back, it hits Drift. And then is that what it happens? Then based on what's in that email, whatever skills you have set up would then kick off whatever flow?
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're exactly right. So let's actually walk through a use case. So I've got a skill set up to process human replies that come from, in this case, the source of Jessica at reply.navarro.com. That's it's an email that we use for lead nurture. So this skill is saying that as soon as a email reply hits Drift, if it is a human reply, right? And these are where all of the different categories are. In this case, this skill is specific to human replies coming from this source. I have it routing to me, although I'll show you the workflows and campaigns I have set up in Marketo here in a minute. But under the update tab, so I'm mapping over fields like the date of the reply, the email subject, reply type, reply text over to Marketo fields. And then I've got these Marketo fields that I'm using in tokens to create a Salesforce task. And then when I assign the lead to an SDR to follow up, they can look at the Salesforce task with all of the information on the reply specifically. So, okay, so I've got let's see. So I'm updating these fields. I'm also adding the person to a static list. So in Marketo, in one of our, let's see, nurture programs. So this campaign's triggered off somebody getting added to that list. There's a couple other filters just to make sure they're a member of the engagement program, that the Drift subject contains, the subject that would be specific to this particular email within the engagement program. And then within the flow, changing the person's program status, which is great because yeah, I think traditionally without using a tool like this, it's hard to automate like changing somebody to a success status within a program simply off of an email reply. But in this case, we can. And we get way more email replies than we do form fills. And so, yeah, it's just definitely something that's useful. I'll walk through the flow here in a minute, but just getting to that. So going into the members tab, obviously you can filter the members by specific status. And so this is like great for our team to go in here and just say, hey, like our content team who's actually writing the emails that we're using for nurture, they can come in here and they can look and see exactly like who responded, how many conversions that we've had, which is great for them. But then, so additionally in the flow, right, changing the person's program status, logging an interesting moment, and then creating a Salesforce task. It's a completed task, but it contains the text of the reply And then the interesting moment will, let the salesperson know to reference the task to get the full, context on whatever they said. And the interesting moment is what we use in our MQL email alerts. And yeah, so then I guess I have a couple tabs
John,
here.
I have a quick question. Sorry to interrupt you. On the, I love you created Salesforce task with this info. I think that's awesome. If it's already completed, how is the owner of the, I guess it's assigned to the owner of the record. How are they alerted to that task?
Yeah, so they get an email about, in this case, like the MQL, information about their last interesting moment that's saying, hey, reference the task to see what they said. And then our process is that they would add the person to an outreach cadence.
Gotcha. Okay.
And follow up that way. So we don't use tasks as much with like the SDR team. We use outreach. And then from a life cycle standpoint, like transitioning the person from the MQL stage to the SAL stage, I do through a trigger campaign that's listening for an outreach activity to get logged back to Salesforce.
Okay. Cool.
Rather than like doing it off of a completed task. But yeah, so then like this is exactly how the task looks in Salesforce. So subject, right? And then the comment. So the person's reply is up here at the top. And then what's also nice is the email that was sent is down below. So the SDR not only gets the context on, hey, what did this person say, but also like what prompted them to say whatever they said.
Nice.
So then another use case is people leaving their company. So I've got a skill set up for that that's very similar to the human reply, but listening for the type to be left company. And then in this case, I'm only adding a person to this specific list. And then in Marketo, I've got another trigger campaign.
And that left company logic is just straight up what's built into Drift, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Part of the benefit of their product. But yeah, so somebody gets added to this list. And in this case, I will invalidate their email because they're no longer with their company. I will also create a Salesforce task and I'll send an alert to the sales owner, as well as if they're an active customer, the CSM owner. And they love this. Like before that, they didn't have much context to understand when somebody has like left a company or when they needed to, I don't know, like look for a new point of contact within a given account. So I've gotten good feedback from them on, hey, this is great. This is useful. We get value from this. So yeah, a pretty like simple process, like step by step, I think, but definitely creates a lot of value.
Do you ever come across a case where it's categorized incorrectly?
I haven't dug into too much. I mean, so one of the nice things is Drift gives you like your own inbox. And so you could come in here and you can filter. So let's see, filter left company. You can further drill down by the specific like email source. Is this what I wanted? Yeah, this is what I wanted to look at. So you could come down and click, line by line and see. I haven't seen any situations specifically. I'm sure there are some, but
Yeah.
you can definitely come in here and QA. I think this is what I was looking for. Yeah. So, okay, let's look at people who have left the company with, so high quality. So Drift will also determine like if they recognize a new contact within the body of an email, if they're like, if they're confident that it's like a high quality contact or I think like low quality. Let's look at an example. Yeah, I was expecting it to be more aliases like this one, but I'm not exactly sure how they determine what the quality is. But if we click onto like this response, so you can see the body of the email references like this new person, Eric, and this email address. So you can have a skill set up in Drift that will create a new contact. I haven't done that yet. I wanted to at least have Drift live for like a month or two and start looking at like the data, to your point, Caroline, and making sure like I was super comfortable creating new contacts from Drift before I actually set up a skill to automate it. But it looks like, last 30 days, responses or replies that have been categorized as left company with high quality contacts, there's been 37. In total, 75. Yeah. So about 500 all in all. But definitely a nice feature.
Would that check for duplicates before it creates it, or is that something you'd have to handle on the Salesforce side?
Well, is it existing? So I think it looks at the email address, right?
When it's creating new contacts, I believe it would just look at email address. I mean, since that's the default within Marketo. And if it was going to create a new contact, I mean, it would be a net new email address. If there's like additional duplicate rules that you have, whether they're like the Salesforce dupe rules or you have ring lead or something, I think like that you'd have to take care of that after the record gets created or
Right.
in whatever workflows that you're already using.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything set up or plan to have it set up for like to measure the ROI of this, to say, hey, we got this many people that responded to that email that resulted in an opportunity that we probably wouldn't have gotten before?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So this is one dashboard that we have in Salesforce. And so so what this is looking at is last touch attribution. So whatever the last campaign response was prior to the opportunity getting created. So these 7 opportunities that have been created as soon as this loads have all been a result of direct replies from our nurture.
Awesome.
But yeah, so that's part of what is great about logging a program success and syncing it over to Salesforce based off of the human reply, is that if any opportunities do get created, you can tie it back from an attribution standpoint.
Yeah, that's cool. That pays for this pretty quick if you get some business.
Plus, it's hours and hours and hours of your team's time that you're not manually responding, logging, creating new records, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it pays for itself pretty quick, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure. So let's see. The other skills that they have, there's an enrich contact skill. So Drift is only going to enrich phone numbers and job titles. So I think it's in the skill itself. Let me confirm. Yeah, so you can use the standard fields and just update those when they're empty, create custom fields and map phone and job title to those, which is what we've done. But pretty straightforward from an enrichment standpoint. It's just phone numbers and job titles that they parse from email signatures.
And that is a shared service across, right? So they're always looking for these across everybody, and they're keeping that database, even if you're not sending these. How do I say this the right way? So my organization is sending a bunch of stuff out, and it's screen scraping and getting phone numbers and emails off of that. If you send to one of those people and don't have that information, are you getting the benefit of the fact that I send an email to those people and got a screen scrape?
I don't think so. I think it's just specifically on the replies from emails that you send.
Yours. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay.
Yeah, and then the last skill that we haven't looked at, we've talked about it, is creating contacts. So this is one that I haven't set up yet, but basically like the filter tab looks the same as the other like update contact skill and the route skill that we were just looking at. And then, you know, similar also with the update tab, right? There's field mapping. The one thing that's different is you can map sender fields to the new contact. So what that means is, like, let's say, let's use the example of somebody leaving a company again. So if the person who left, if they are the sender of the email reply, in this case, like an autoresponder that says, hey, you know, this person left the company, here's the new contact. Any fields that you have on that sender contact, the one that's now invalid, you could map over to the new contact. So for example, like if I don't want to use company domain, which is a drift field, mapped to my company name field in Marketo for this new person, I could remove that. And I could say, hey, I want to use the company name for the person who sent the email, right? The person who no longer works at the company, and map that to the company name field for the new contact that Drift creates for the person that they parsed out of the body of the email. So that's what this means. Yeah, and then the last thing I wanted to show was here. So like, let's say that you're sending a lot of emails from sales reps themselves. And you wanted to set up a skill and Drift email to dynamically route those replies to the specific owner of the lead. So you can create a token. In this case, it's an email script token. And what this is saying is, if the lead is a part of this specific segment, so enterprise plus VP or higher, then I want the token to render the person's first name dot their last name at reply.narvo.com, which is how all of our emails are set up. Like the lead owner first name and last name, it's nice for us because it always matches up with their email address. So like this would work for us. I don't know if it would work for everybody. If the person's not in this segment, then use the newsletter at reply.narvo.com as the default. So essentially, like, obviously you don't have to use a Marketo segment. I mean, you could set up your velocity script in any way you want. I think the reason why you might want to do this is, I know not all lead owners are always accurate. So maybe there's like a subset of your database that you want to nurture with personalized email addresses from the reps themselves. And so maybe you would want to create a Marketo segment just to make sure that like the people that fall within that segment are owned by certain people, or just that you're confident in the data quality behind like the lead owners actually being accurate. So this token will render with the email in the correct format. If we look at a preview of the email, let me view it by person. You'll see that it'll render with the right format for the address. And then, right, in Drift email, you would have your dynamic route skill set up to use a dynamic alias, basically just removing the subdomain. So yeah, that is a way where you could scale that for larger engagement programs. And
Awesome.
Yeah, it's great stuff. How does this compare, Caroline, to what you got from Sifrock? I mean, I know it's not sort of the
Well, it's
same thing.
Yeah, it's definitely it's more advanced than when I used it like what, 6 months ago, 8 months ago. So they've definitely added, like the dynamic routing and stuff like that. That wasn't there previously. But everything else looks pretty much the same.
So is this Sift Rock that got purchased and
Yeah.
repurposed? Is that?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
It is.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting too. If you look at the documentation on Drift's website, like sometimes it says Sift Rock, like they haven't actually
Oops.
updated everything yet.
Yeah,
It's been a
because it
few
like
years.
Nice.
sifts the emails by type and routes them accordingly. So I still call it the wrong name, but yeah, is an awesome product. I loved it. I really should implement it again here. Need to put it on my wish list.
Yeah, it's great. It's easy to use. It's definitely nice because if you do send emails from like actual employees, I'm sure like you get complaints sometimes about autoresponders hitting their inboxes, and that's like very common. And we've got some situations where we send emails from like our CEO, and he definitely doesn't want autoresponders like that in his inbox. And so Drift Email, setting up a subdomain, pointing to their server, processing replies there, completely takes it out of their inbox, but the email will still look like it's coming from a person. And so that's really nice. And then, yeah, on top of that, you get all of the other benefits too. You can create those different skills for the reply types like left company, other system responses, things like that, and then handle updating data in Marketo so that you can maintain your database health over time and validate emails when it makes sense, suspend people when it makes sense, et cetera. So
Exactly.
John, a quick question there. Just based on what you're showing, is it correct to say that you primarily use it for replies, or do you guys also, it's every now and then, send deployments out of Drift email?
So you can actually send emails through Drift email.
Okay.
Yeah. So all of the emails are still sent from Marketo, and Marketo servers, unless you're on your own custom IP. It's specifically just the replies that are handled by Drift.
Gotcha.
And the setup looks pretty darn straightforward. How long did it take you to get it up and running?
Not too long. It took me like a week, honestly. And it was more thinking about strategically how we wanted to use it with really like within our nurture and sending replies to reps and how we wanted to process people through our life cycle and score them and whatnot. And what I'm doing right now is like that first campaign that I showed that was within one of our engagement programs. Those replies are routed to me, right? So I will like take a quick look at them. And if it's a positive reply, I will manually update that person's score, and then they'll flow through our life cycle. They'll get routed to an SDR. The task will be there for them. Interesting moment, all of that. I'm not opposed to sending everything to the SDR team, even if the response is negative. It's part of their job, right? Take the lead, turn it back if you need to. I was just more curious on like what depth I wanted to take with the automation side of it, and like what was the right level, like fully automated or so I was kind of more curious. I will say a lot of the replies that we've gotten have leaned more positive. Generally, people don't reply if it's going to be like, negative. I mean, we have gotten negative replies for sure, but generally they lean a little bit positive. So it's probably something that I will start to automate. And basically, I would probably just create another campaign within our scoring program. And update their score there. I'm not really sure how I would do it, but basically the last step in that flow would be making sure the person's score gets updated, and then they would flow through the life cycle.
Cool.
Alrighty,
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop recording this portion.